The Mongols were once the largest land empire in human history. With ruthless battle strategies, they built a fearsome reputation. Chief among the Mongols was the mighty Genghis Khan. How did his actions inspire so many to fight behind him? And what terrifyingly brutal acts made him one of the bloodiest conquerors of all time? Let's find out today with Newfound History. The Mongols reigned in the 13th and 14th centuries between the coast of China along the northern border of the Himalayas as the supreme authority of much of today's Middle East. While taking hostages, using surprise attacks, and torturing surrendered soldiers was standard Mongol procedure, none came close to the horrifying fates Genghis Khan delivered to his enemies. Genghis Khan came from humble beginnings. He was born in 1162, given the first name Temujin. He did not become Khan, which means ruler of all Mongols, until his 44th year. Genghis is based on the Mongol word Tenis, which means ocean. Supposedly, he was born with a blood clot, foretelling his might as a great and violent leader. Even in his childhood, Temujin already displayed bloodthirsty tendencies. When he was 14, his family was at odds with their clan, causing his mother to take care of 4 of her own children and 2 stepchildren. Temujin helped feed his struggling family, although they didn't always agree with other members on how food should be divided and had frequent disagreements with his half-brother, Beter. One day the two of them had an argument over food Genghis had caught. Beter went straight to their mother, and after some discussion, she sided with Beter. So what did Genghis do? He stalked his half-brother through the bushes and shot him with his bow. Genghis showed no remorse for murdering his brother, and his furious mother did not retaliate, fully aware of Genghis's rising strength. By his 20th year, Temujin's father had been poisoned by the Tartars at a wedding. He was already a well-known military leader and was awarded command of his own clan army. One of the first pledges he made to his new soldiers was to seek revenge for his father's murder. Fast forward 11 years, and Temujin had already cornered the primary Tartar army and camp, slaughtering many of them in battle. He gathered every Tartar his soldiers could get their hands on, men, women, and children. In a final act of brutal deliverance, he walked over to a wagon wheel and marked a thick line upon it. He announced to his army that all who stand above this line shall be executed. The line was 3 feet high. The surviving children and infants were mostly raised as slaves. That was the revenge punishment for killing his father, and just the beginning of a long series of torture tactics. The Mongols were as savage in physical confrontations as they were in psychological warfare. Once, they besieged what is today the city of Beijing. Genghis had the people living in the city starving after 3 years, and they had to turn to cannibalism to survive. What's most terrifying is that this was perhaps the lesser of 2 evils. Genghis would have still put most of them to the sword. To teach the few survivors a lesson of what empire not to cross, they erected 50-foot-high pyramids in China, not of brick and stone, but of human skulls. That became common practice of the Mongols. Whenever they went to take over a neighboring enemy city, they'd issue a warning: surrender now, and you'll mostly be spared. Resist, and your people's skulls will be the very monument of your city. For comparison, historians have estimated that just during Genghis Khan's life, upwards of 10% of the world's population was directly killed or died indirectly as a result of his conquests. Genghis Khan was proud of his rampages and knew from past conquests that the more terror the Mongols inspired, the more enemies would surrender without a fight. However, if you personally insulted the Khan, you were in for a fate worse than death. Inalchuk was the name of a nobleman who once stood in the way of the great Khan's conquests. Genghis had sent a large caravan of 500 men to create more trade routes in the region. In spite, Inalchuk had the caravan destroyed and refused the Khan's offer for peace. So what did Genghis Khan do to Inalchuk? He put the entire civilian population to the sword and razed the city to the ground. Genghis then personally poured molten silver over Inalchuk's head to signify an ironic end to others unwilling to help in the Khan's insatiable quest for riches. Despite what most people think, the Mongols did have certain rules of who they could kill and how. One of their ancient rules was that they couldn't spill noble blood, and if they caught someone of noble birth, they wouldn't kill them traditionally by sword or bow. Don't be fooled into thinking that they were merciful to nobles, though. Oh no. Genghis Khan devised even worse methods for their demise. If he was in a good mood, his men would break their necks. If not, they would be suffocated. There's one instance where they captured a surrendered Russian force and laid the captive nobles under a wooden platform. The captors threw a celebration of their success and danced on top of their noble enemies until they seemed nothing more than pulp on the ground. It wasn't long before the Khan's rampage became a legend, and his reputation preceded him. He was a vicious warrior and skilled at most conventional weapons. There's a story that describes an archer named Jeb who intrigued Genghis Khan so much that he wanted an audience with him. The Mongols had been fighting an enemy clan when suddenly an arrow struck the Khan's horse. It was bad. Should the Khan fall in battle, it was certain the empire would soon crumble to nothing. The Mongols fended off their enemies and sent them running in fear, but spared the archer, who had ridden bravely into the camp to address the Khan himself. He openly admitted that he was the one to shoot the Khan's horse and that he'd accept death if that was his fate, but if the Khan were to spare him, he'd serve him loyally. This would be one of the few instances of the Khan showing mercy to an enemy who'd wronged him personally. Impressed by the archer's bravery and skill, Genghis spared him and enlisted him as one of his top commanders from that day forward. In another instance of his brutality toward prisoners, the Khan was known for using captured enemies as meat shields for particularly expensive campaigns. However, the Khan was selective when it came to picking human shields. There were times when he'd execute enemy soldiers and others when he'd let them serve his army. Don't mistake this for mercy, though, as there are few instances of the captured becoming clan members. Prisoners could earn a place in the Khan's forces if they were good soldiers. His men intimidated the prisoners of war to fight as well as possible. Should they not, they'd be walked at sword point in the front line, forcing enemy soldiers to waste arrows, burning oil, and stones on the Khan's unarmed human shields. Be warned that none of the terrifying actions we've described previously match the savagery of what's known as the most brutal massacre in history. By far, the most savage of the Khan's actions was the sacking of Urgench. Urgench was the last city on the Khan's conquest of the Khwarezmiya Empire and one of the most difficult campaigns for the Mongols. Due to their terror warfare, the Mongols could conquer a city in just a couple of weeks, sometimes a month for difficult enemies. The Khwarezmiya Empire had dragged the battle out for 6 months. Even when the Mongols got inside the city, they were unable to pillage it as they did with other enemies, as the inside of the city was fortified, and the enemy used guerrilla warfare techniques from every corner of the city. The Mongols decided they needed drastic measures to conquer the city. So what did they do? They burned the city down. Even after the blistering inferno, the surviving soldiers continued to battle the Khan's forces, knowing full well that capture meant death. Enraged with their defiance, Genghis Khan had a dam diverted to flood what was left of the city and had any remaining soldier or civilian murdered, with no exceptions. The massacre of the Khwarezmiya Empire amounted to over 1 million people and is one of the largest genocides in the history of mankind. Which of these horrible things Genghis Khan did do you think was the worst? Let us know in the comments below, and thanks for watching this episode of Newfound History.